everybody. Thank you for coming to my presentation today. I'm going to discuss a recent incident that happened in the news. The setting itself is relatively simple. On August 9th of this year, which was a Monday, around noon, JetBlue Flight 1052, which was flying from Pittsburgh, landed at JFK Airport in New York City. This is what we know. After this, all the details become a little murky. There was a flight attendant aboard this JetBlue Flight 1052. His name was Steven Slater. He is 38 years old. And at the time, he had been a flight attendant for 20 years. When the story initially hit newspapers, his version of the story went such. There was an altercation between two passengers when they were very first boarding the plane in Pittsburgh. Apparently, two women began arguing because they couldn't fit all of their luggage. They could cram both of them into one of the overheads. Flight went on as scheduled, landed. At the end of the flight, an unidentified passenger, and here again is where details start to get murky. Some reports say it's a man, and some reports say it was a woman. Regardless, as the plane had landed but was still in motion on the ground, taxiing to where it would let passengers get off. And, you know, normally you're supposed to stay, your seatbelt light is still fastened, you're supposed to sit until the plane stops moving. But apparently somebody tried to stand up and opened up the overhead and tried to pull their luggage down while the plane was still in motion. It was at this point that Steven Slater claims he approached the passenger and asked them to sit down, at which point he somehow got a knock on his head. That's been confirmed medically. He has some sort of, they don't know if it was because the door of the overhead hit him in the forehead. They don't know if it was because the luggage came down and knocked him in the forehead, but he had a gash, like a goose egg on his forehead. And apparently, at this point, the passenger who was standing up trying to retrieve their luggage called him a motherfucker. So Steven Slater goes to the intercom system for the plane and announced something to the effect of, "I've worked in this business for 20 years. I'm done. To the passenger who called me a motherfucker, fuck you." Then he proceeded to go to the flight attendant refrigerator, grab 2 Blue Moon beers, walked to the emergency exit, opened the door, pulled the cord, deployed that yellow emergency slide, deployed that, slid down it with his 2 beers, walked to his car, got in, drove home. Alright, now we're working in chronological order here. So approximately 25 minutes after Steven Slater pulls the emergency chute, JetBlue, the airline, reports the incident to police. About an hour later, the police arrive at his home, where he lives in Bell Harbor, Queens, and they arrest him. He is formally charged with criminal mischief, reckless endangerment, and criminal trespass, to which he pleads not guilty. You have to understand that in large part, the charges were based on the fact that he deployed the emergency chute, because theoretically, nobody was injured, but theoretically, had somebody, once the plane stops, usually there's people that come immediately and start to unload luggage, do all that plane people stuff. If somebody had been standing right immediately there and they weren't expecting that emergency chute to be deployed, they could have been seriously injured or even killed, because apparently that emergency slide, when you pull the thing, it deploys with a force of 3,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, which is a huge amount of pressure. Additionally, they're suing because apparently once you deploy that slide, in order to replace it and have it ready to go for next time, it costs anywhere between $10,000 to $30,000 to get that thing fixed, repaired, tucked back in there, ready to go. So all this happens. Immediately, overnight, he becomes an internet meme, representing inspiration to the downtrodden blue-collar worker. You know, he's that, I'm not gonna take this job anymore, you can take it and stuff it. Okay, within a few days, by August 12th, newspapers began reporting that neither Stephen's co-workers, the other flight attendants on board, nor a single passenger from the flight itself verify his count, and that in fact, many witnesses claim that Stephen was the aggressor, that he was the instigator of this confrontation. By the end of the month, by the end of August, reports began surfacing that, okay, so basically Stephen quits his job / JetBlue makes a public announcement that they fired him, and nobody can tell which happened first. I mean, regardless, he's unemployed, but nobody knows which happened first. Ultimately, about a month later, what I would consider arguably the least inflammatory report on the incident gets published on August 23rd. So, what happened was there was a woman named Heather Robinson who had been a journalist for most of her career, is now retired, but she had actually been a passenger aboard Flight 1052. And so after she was watching all of these reports surface and watching, you know, all the he said, she said, she publishes on her website an article that she titles "From a Passenger on JetBlue Flight 1052, Why Stephen Slater Has Gone from Working Class Hero to Public Enemy #1. Her basic argument, her premise for her article, summarily, is that she says it's really the fault of both parties. It's everybody's responsibility that these reports are so ambiguous, and that she kind of thinks it was it was kind of everybody's fault. However, I think that she said probably one of the wisest things about the case. She makes the point that a wise man I knew used to tell me that in matters of politics, law, and all manner of dispute, the truth is usually somewhere in between.
Great. I don't know.